On a quiet afternoon in a small suburban park, the sun casts long shadows across the playground. The air is filled with the gentle rustling of leaves, the distant sound of children playing, and the chirping of birds. It's a peaceful scene, at least on the surface. In one corner of the park, a group of teenage boys gathers near the swings. Their laughter rings out, but it's not the kind that spreads joy. It's sharp, mocking, filled with a sense of superiority. These boys, with their youthful arrogance, have made a habit of finding amusement in tormenting others, especially those they see as weak or different. It's become their summer pastime, finding a target, taking pleasure in feeling powerful. Today, their attention turns to a lone figure seated on a bench under the shade of an old oak tree. The man, Kane, is in his late 60s, dressed in a simple shirt, worn jeans, and a hat that casts a shadow over his weathered face. In his hands he holds a book, its edges frayed, its cover faded by time. To the boys, he looks like an easy target, a man past his prime with no fight left in him. "Check out the old guy," one of the boys sneers, nudging his friends. His voice drips with contempt. "Bet he can barely stand, let alone defend himself. Probably too old to even know where he is." The others chuckle in agreement, their eyes locked on the elderly man. They see only what's on the surface, an old, frail figure, someone who couldn't possibly pose a threat. But little do they know, appearances can be deceiving, and they are about to learn just how wrong their assumptions can be. Kane sits quietly, turning the pages of his book, seemingly unaware of the group's growing interest in him. He's a picture of calm amidst the brewing storm, the peacefulness of the park mirrored in his demeanor. Yet beneath that calm lies a strength that none of these teenagers could ever imagine, a depth of experience and discipline that time has only sharpened. The boys exchange smirks, emboldened by each other's presence. They decide to approach him, circling the bench like vultures. Their steps are confident, their voices full of scorn, eager to disrupt Kane's peaceful afternoon. What they don't realize is that their actions today will lead to an encounter that will change their lives forever, an encounter that will challenge their arrogance and force them to face the consequences of their prejudice. The teenagers move closer, their laughter growing louder as they surround the bench where Kane sits. One of them, taller and broader than the others, takes the lead, stepping directly into Kane's line of sight. His friends watch, eager to see what he'll do next. "Hey, old man," the leader calls out, his voice filled with mockery. "What's that you're reading? Something for little kids?" He snatches at the air near Kane's book, his expression smug. Kane pauses, his eyes still on the page, as if he hasn't even noticed the interruption. His fingers continue to turn the book's yellowed pages, moving slowly, calmly, ignoring the growing hostility around him. Another boy, emboldened by Kane's silence, pipes up. "Yeah, shouldn't you be somewhere else? Like back where you came from?" His tone is sharp, filled with a mix of contempt and bravado. The words hang in the air, heavy with the weight of their intent. Kane finally looks up, his gaze sweeping over the boys. His expression remains unchanged, calm, unbothered, like the still water of a deep pond. The boys shift uneasily under his steady stare, but their leader steps closer, determined not to lose face in front of his friends. "What's the matter, old man? Cat got your tongue," the leader taunts, leaning forward to loom over Kane. "Think you're better than us, huh?" His friends murmur in agreement, edging closer as if drawing strength from each other's presence. Still, Kane says nothing. He shifts his gaze back to his book, dismissing the boys with a silence that only fuels their frustration. The leader's face flushes with anger, his hand balling into a fist. "Don't ignore me," he shouts, and in one swift motion he raises his hand as if to strike. But before he can follow through, Kane's hand moves, quick as lightning. He grabs the boy's wrist, his grip like iron. The leader's eyes widen in shock as he finds himself frozen, unable to break free from the old man's hold. The other boys stare, their bravado melting away in an instant. Kane lifts his head, meeting the leader's gaze directly. His eyes are sharp, holding a quiet power that makes the boy's knees feel weak. "You shouldn't do that, son," Kane says softly, his voice barely more than a whisper, yet it cuts through the air like a knife. "Violence won't get you what you want." The leader tries to yank his hand back, but Kane's grip is unyielding. He struggles, his earlier arrogance replaced by a rising panic. "Let go of me," he demands, but his voice cracks, betraying his fear. Nearby, an elderly man walking his dog has stopped to watch the scene unfold. As he recognizes Kane, his eyes widen with realization, and he rushes toward the group. "Wait, stop!" he shouts, waving his hands to get the boys' attention. "Do you kids even know who this man is?" The boys turn to look at him, their confusion growing. The leader's friends exchange uneasy glances, unsure of what to make of the old man's urgency. The leader, still trapped in Kane's grasp, stammers, "What do you mean? He's just some old guy." The elderly man shakes his head, his expression filled with a mix of disbelief and concern. "This isn't just some old man. His name is Kane Wilson. He's a master martial artist. I trained under him years ago. He was a champion, one of the best." The teenagers freeze, their eyes darting back to Kane, who remains calm, his grip still firm around the leader's wrist. The realization hits them like a punch to the gut. This wasn't just some defenseless old man. He was a former karate master, someone who could have easily overpowered them if he chose to. The leader's bravado crumbles entirely, his knees shaking as he tries to pull away. I didn't know," he stammers, his voice barely audible. "I didn't mean to." Kane releases the boy's wrist, letting his arm drop back to his side. The leader stumbles backward, rubbing his wrist and looking at Kane with a mixture of fear and awe. The other boys take a step back as well, their arrogance shattered, their faces pale. "You didn't know," Kane repeats softly, his tone carrying a hint of sadness. He rises slowly from the bench, standing tall in front of the boys, his presence suddenly feeling much larger. "And that's the problem, isn't it? You acted without thinking, without understanding. That's how people get hurt." The boys remain silent, their earlier confidence gone, replaced by a growing sense of shame. Kane looks at them each in turn, his gaze steady. "You think it's fun to pick on people you think are weaker than you. But real strength, true strength, isn't about being able to hurt someone. It's about knowing when not to. It's about using your strength to protect, to teach, to make the world a little better." The leader drops his gaze, unable to meet Kane's eyes. His friends shuffle their feet, looking anywhere but at the man they had thought was an easy target. The reality of their actions, of their ignorance, sinks in deeper with each passing second. Kane's expression softens slightly as he sees the realization dawn in their eyes. "You're young," he says, his voice gentler now. "You have time to change, to learn. But if you keep living with hate in your hearts, it will only destroy you in the end." The elderly man, still holding his dog's leash, steps closer, shaking his head slowly. "You boys have no idea how lucky you are that he didn't react the way you thought he would. If Kane had wanted to, he could have ended this very differently." The boys look at Kane, and for the first time they see him not as a target, but as someone deserving of respect, a man who could have responded with violence, but chose wisdom instead. One of them, his voice small and shaky, finally manages to speak. We're sorry. We didn't know." Kane offers them a small, knowing smile, a hint of warmth in his eyes. "That's the thing about life," he says softly. "You can't always know everything, but you can choose how you treat others. And that choice, it makes all the difference." The boys nod, absorbing his words, the weight of their actions settling heavily on their shoulders. They know that they'll never forget this moment, this encounter with a man who showed them what true strength really means. As Kane turns back to his bench, picking up his book and settling back down, the boys linger for a moment longer, their expressions somber. They had come to the park looking for a victim, someone they could bully without consequences. Instead, they found a teacher, a lesson they had never expected. The elderly man claps a hand on the leader's shoulder, giving it a gentle squeeze. "You learned something today, boys. Don't forget it." They nod again, still dazed as they begin to walk away, their footsteps slow, their minds filled with the gravity of what they had experienced. Behind them, Kane returns to his quiet afternoon, a small, satisfied smile on his face. He knows that today he planted a seed of change in their hearts. one that just might grow into something good. Weeks have passed since the encounter in the park, and the events of that day continue to replay in the minds of the teenagers. They've avoided the park for a while, unable to shake the shame that clung to them after their run-in with Kane. But in that time, something inside them has started to shift. The memory of Kane's calm, his strength without violence, haunts them, challenging their previous mindset. One afternoon, the group finds themselves walking through town, past the familiar sights and sounds of their suburban neighborhood. They no longer laugh loudly at strangers or throw insults at passers-by. Instead, they walk in contemplative silence, each lost in their own thoughts. One of them, the same boy who had nearly raised his hand against Kane, glances at his friends, breaking the quiet. "You ever think about that, old man?" he asks, his voice uncharacteristically soft. The others nod, exchanging uneasy glances. "Yeah. I keep thinking about what he said, about how we didn't know anything. He wasn't wrong, you know?" Another boy, quieter than the rest, kicks at a pebble on the sidewalk. "Yeah, I guess he wasn't," he admits. "I've been thinking too. Maybe it's time we tried being different." The leader, who once thrived on being feared, looks around at his friends. There's a weight in his expression, a maturity that wasn't there before. "I've been feeling the same way," he says slowly. "Maybe we should go back. Maybe we should try to make things right with him." They agree, and together they make their way back to the park where it all began. The air is cooler, the sun lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the playground and the paths. As they walk, the sounds of children playing and families chatting fill the air, a stark contrast to the tension of their last visit. When they reach the park bench where they had confronted Kane, they find him there once again. He sits with the same calm demeanor, the familiar book open in his lap, as if time itself has not moved since their last encounter. But as they approach, their steps slow, their earlier resolve faltering. The leader clears his throat awkwardly, drawing Kane's attention. Kane looks up, recognizing the faces before him, and a faint smile touches his lips. He sets down his book, folding his hands in his lap as he watches them, waiting for them to speak. "Sir," the leader begins, his voice unsteady, "we didn't expect to see you here again, but we're glad we did." He pauses, taking a breath to steady himself. "We've been thinking a lot about what you said, and, well, we came back because we wanted to apologize for everything." The other boys nod in agreement, each of their expressions earnest, filled with a sincerity that wasn't there before. Kane studies their faces, seeing the change in their eyes, the uncertainty, the humility, the desire to make amends. He lets the silence stretch for a moment before speaking, his tone gentle but firm. "I'm glad you came back," Kane says, his voice carrying a warmth that surprises them. "It takes strength to admit when you're wrong, and even more, to try and make things right." The leader nods, swallowing hard. "We know we messed up," he says, looking down at his feet, "and we're not asking for you to forgive us, but we want to show you that we're trying to be better." Kane regards them thoughtfully, then nods slowly. "I can see that," he says, "and it means more than you know. But remember, change isn't about what you say. It's about what you do. It's about the choices you make every day." One of the younger boys steps forward hesitantly, his voice barely above a whisper. "We've talked a lot since then about what you said, about strength and understanding. We've tried to change how we treat people." Kane's expression softens, a trace of pride touching his features. "That's a good start," he says. "But don't stop there. Life will keep testing you, giving you chances to prove who you are. It's up to you to make sure that when those moments come, you choose to be better." The boys nod, absorbing his words. Then, after a moment's hesitation, the leader speaks up again. "There's something else we wanted to ask. Would you show us some of what you know? Not to fight or anything, but to learn. We've realized we have a lot to learn." Kane raises an eyebrow, his expression thoughtful. He looks over the boys, seeing the sincerity in their faces, the eagerness to learn not just about martial arts, but about the discipline and wisdom behind it. He takes a deep breath, considering their request. "I'm not a teacher anymore," Kane says, his voice gentle. I've left that life behind, but I can show you a little. Just enough to help you understand what real strength is. But remember, what I teach isn't for fighting. It's for discipline, for understanding yourself, and for protecting others. You must never misuse it. The boys nod eagerly, their expression serious. We understand, sir, the leader says, speaking for the group. We won't let you down. Cain rises slowly from the bench, his movements graceful despite his age. He leads them to a quiet corner of the park, away from the playground and the other parkgoers. There, on a small patch of grass, he begins to show them the basics, simple blocks, breathing techniques, the foundations of martial arts. His movements are fluid and controlled, each motion carrying a purpose. The boys watch in awe, doing their best to mimic Cain's movements. They stumble and struggle at first, their attempts clumsy and uncoordinated, but Cain is patient, guiding them with a steady hand. His instructions are clear and calm, filled with the same wisdom he had shown them before. It's not about power, he says, demonstrating a block with slow precision. It's about control, knowing how to use your body, your mind. Strength without control is dangerous, but strength with discipline, that's what makes a true warrior. The boys practice, their faces filled with concentration as they try to follow Cain's example. They move through the basic exercises he shows them, each one feeling the weight of his words, understanding the deeper meaning behind the movements. After a while, Cain raises a hand, signaling for them to stop. That's enough for today, he says, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. You've made a good start. But remember, what you've learned is only the beginning. It's up to you to keep learning, to keep growing. The boys stand in a line before him, their expressions filled with gratitude. They know they've only scratched the surface of what Cain could teach them, but they also understand that they've been given a gift, one they need to honor. Thank you, sir, the leader says earnestly, his voice filled with emotion. We'll never forget what you've taught us. Not just today, but before too. Cain nods, his expression warm. Good. Now go and remember. Life is about the choices you make. Make sure you choose to be better than you were yesterday. The boys bow their heads respectfully before turning to leave, walking away with a sense of purpose they hadn't known before. As they disappear down the park path, their laughter is different, softer, kinder, filled with the promise of change. Cain watches them go, a small, satisfied smile on his face. He knows they still have a long journey ahead of them, but today, they've taken the first step, and that, he thinks, is more than enough. He returns to his bench, picking up his book once more, but his mind lingers on the lesson he shared. As the sun sets behind the trees, casting long shadows across the park, Cain knows that he's done his part to plant a seed of change in their hearts. Now it's up to them to let it grow. Weeks roll by, and the boys' lives begin to transform in unexpected ways. The lesson they received from Cain has stayed with them, influencing how they treat others and view themselves. They find themselves thinking twice before acting, choosing respect over mockery, and looking for ways to uplift those around them rather than tear them down. One chilly Saturday morning, they decide to return to the park once more. This time, it isn't to learn any more techniques or to ask for forgiveness. They simply want to check in on Cain. As they approach the familiar bench, they see him seated there as usual, with his book resting on his knee. Cain looks up, surprised but pleased to see them again. "Good morning, boys," he says, closing his book gently. "What brings you here today?" The leader of the group steps forward, a genuine smile on his face. "We just wanted to say hi, sir, and to let you know that, well, we're doing our best to be better, like you said." Cain nods slowly, his eyes filled with a warmth that seems to see right through them. "And how has that been for you?" he asks, leaning back on the bench, his tone inviting them to share. The boys exchange glances before one of them speaks up, his voice filled with a newfound confidence. "It's been different, hard sometimes, but it feels good, like helping people instead of picking on them. We've been volunteering at the community center, helping out with the kids and stuff." Another boy adds, And we've started taking those lessons you gave us to heart, not just the moves, but the idea of staying calm and thinking before we act. It's not always easy, but we're trying." Kane listens, nodding thoughtfully as they speak. He can see the change in them, not just in their words, but in their demeanor, the way they hold themselves. There's a humility in their posture, a kindness in their eyes that wasn't there before. "I'm proud of you," Kane says finally, his voice sincere. "It takes courage to change, especially when you've been walking a different path for so long. But remember, the journey doesn't end here. It's a lifelong practice, staying true to who you want to be." The leader of the group smiles, a bit sheepishly. "We know, sir. And we've been thinking. You said you're not a teacher anymore, but we kind of see you as one. Not just for the karate stuff, but for life." Kane's eyebrows raise slightly and a soft chuckle escapes him. "Is that so?" he says, a glimmer of amusement in his eyes. "Well, I'm honored. But the real lessons come from your own experiences, from the choices you make each day. I just helped you see what was already inside you." The boys nod, understanding his words. They linger for a while longer, talking about their lives, their challenges, and their hopes for the future. Kane listens with patience and wisdom, offering guidance where he can and letting them discover their own answers when needed. As the conversation winds down, one of the boys hesitates before speaking up. "Sir, we've been meaning to ask, why did you choose not to fight us that day? You could have easily put us in our place. Why didn't you?" Kane considers the question for a moment, his expression turning serious. "Because violence is a choice, just like anything else," he begins. "I've spent my whole life learning how to defend myself, but I've also learned that true strength doesn't come from using those skills. It comes from knowing when not to use them. Hurting you wouldn't have taught you what you needed to learn, but patience, understanding, those are the real tools of change." The boys absorb his words, nodding slowly. They realize that Kane's choice that day had given them the chance to become better versions of themselves. If he had met their aggression with violence, they might never have understood the importance of respect and humility. "We get it now," the leader says quietly. "Thank you for giving us that chance, sir." Kane smiles at them, a gentle pride in his eyes. "You earned it yourselves, boys. Now go out there and make the most of it." With that, they say their goodbyes and leave the park, their hearts lighter and their spirits lifted. As they walk away, they feel a sense of closure, knowing that they've come full circle from where they started. The boys' transformation doesn't go unnoticed in their community. Word spreads about the change in their behavior, and soon, others begin to see them in a new light. Teachers at their school commend them for their newfound dedication to their studies. Neighbors who once kept their distance now smile and wave as they pass by. Even their parents, who had struggled to understand their rebellious streak, begin to see the potential in their sons. Inspired by Kane's example, the boys decide to take on a new project, starting a self-defense class at the local community center. They want to teach younger kids the basics of self-defense, but more importantly, they want to pass on the lessons they've learned about respect, self-control, and standing up for what's right. The community center, which had always struggled with low attendance, sees a surge in interest as word spreads about the new class. Parents sign up their children eagerly, grateful for the opportunity to keep them engaged and safe. The boys, once known for causing trouble, now find themselves in a position of leadership, guiding the younger generation with the same patience and empathy they learned from Kane. One afternoon, as they finish up a class, the boys find Kane waiting outside the center, a proud smile on his face. He watches as they help the kids gather their things and send them home, their lessons filled with laughter and enthusiasm. When the last child leaves, Kane approaches them, nodding approvingly. "You've done well," he says, his voice filled with warmth. "I'm proud of what you've built here." The boys grin, their faces lighting up with pride. "We couldn't have done it without you, sir," the leader says, scratching the back of his head sheepishly. "You showed us the way." Kane shakes his head gently. "You found the way yourselves. I just helped you see the path." He pauses, looking around at the community center, the laughter of children still echoing in the air. "But I'm glad to see that you've turned your lessons into something good. That's how real change happens, one small act at a time." The boys nod, understanding the depth of his words. They know they still have a long way to go, but they're ready for the journey, knowing that they're no longer walking it alone. As the sun sets on another day, Kane returns to his favorite park bench, the book resting in his lap. He watches as families pass by, children playing on the swings and slides, their laughter filling the air. It's a peaceful scene, one that fills him with a deep sense of contentment. He thinks back to the boys, remembering the troubled looks in their eyes when they first confronted him and the transformation that followed. A small smile plays at the corners of his mouth as he realizes that his efforts have made a difference, not just for them, but for the entire community. In the distance, he spots the boys walking together, their heads held high and their laughter genuine. They catch sight of him, waving enthusiastically, and he raises a hand in return, his heart swelling with pride. As he watches them disappear down the path, Kane knows that he has done his part. He has planted seeds of kindness, respect, and understanding, and now he can see them growing in the hearts of those he has touched. He turns his attention back to his book, but before he opens it, he allows himself one final thought. Life is a series of choices, moments that shape us, for better or worse. And every now and then, we're given the chance to be a part of someone else's story, to guide them towards a better path. Kane knows that he may never fully understand the impact of his actions, but he's content with knowing that he has helped others find their way. He takes a deep breath, feeling the cool evening air fill his lungs, and opens his book once more. As the first stars begin to twinkle in the sky, Kane sits in quiet contemplation, his heart at peace. He knows that the world is still far from perfect, but he also knows that for today, he has made it just a little bit brighter. A few months have passed since the boys' lives were transformed by their encounter with Kane. The story of their change, the lessons they learned, and the community self-defense classes they started has spread throughout the neighborhood, becoming a symbol of hope and growth. One crisp autumn afternoon, a local news crew arrives at the community center. They've heard about the program and the remarkable turnaround of the boys who once caused trouble in the area. The reporter, a woman with a friendly smile, interviews them about their journey, how they went from bullies to mentors, and the role Kane played in their transformation. The boys stand together in front of the camera, their expressions a mix of pride and humility. "We were lost," one of them admits, his voice steady. "We didn't realize how much damage we were causing, not just to others but to ourselves. Kane helped us see that there's a different way to be strong, a way that doesn't involve hurting anyone." The reporter nods, her expression sincere. "And how has the community responded?" The leader of the group smiles, glancing back at the bustling community center behind them. "It's been amazing. We've had so much support from everyone. The kids look up to us now, and that's not something we take lightly. We know we have to keep proving ourselves, keep earning their trust." The camera pans to the side, capturing a glimpse of Kane standing in the background, watching the boys with a proud, quiet smile. When asked for a comment, he simply shakes his head, gesturing for the focus to remain on the boys. "This is their story," he says, his voice carrying a tone of quiet authority. "I'm just glad I could be a small part of it." The news segment airs later that evening, and it quickly goes viral on social media. Comments flood in, praising the boys' efforts and the wisdom Kane shared with them. People from all over the city reach out, asking how they can support the program or start similar initiatives in their own neighborhoods. The boys find themselves overwhelmed by the positive feedback, but they remain grounded, knowing that the true work lies in the daily commitment to being better. As the days go by, the community center continues to thrive, offering not just self-defense classes, but a safe space for kids to learn, grow, and connect. The boys, once lost in their own anger and confusion, now serve as mentors, helping the next generation find a path away from violence and towards understanding. One chilly morning, as the first frost glitters on the grass, Kane arrives at the park as he always does. He takes his usual spot on the bench, enjoying the crisp air and the quiet solitude. But this time, there's a sense of finality in his movements, a feeling that today is different. The boys arrive bundled in jackets against the cold, carrying a small gift wrapped in simple paper. They approach Kane, their steps slow and respectful, sensing that this might be one of their last conversations with him. "Sir, we brought you something," the leader says, handing Kane the small package. "Just a little thank you from all of us." Kane takes the gift with a gentle smile, unwrapping it to reveal a framed photograph of the boys with the children from their self-defense class, all beaming with pride. The inscription at the bottom reads, "Thank you for showing us the way." He looks at the photo for a long moment, then meets their eyes, his gaze filled with warmth. "It's beautiful," he says simply, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you, boys. This means more to me than you know." They sit together for a while, talking about their plans for the future, the hopes they have for their community, and the lessons they'll continue to carry with them. Kane listens with a soft smile, offering words of encouragement and wisdom. But as the sun begins to rise higher in the sky, he knows it's time to say goodbye. "I think it's time for me to move on," Kane says gently, looking out at the park he's grown to love. "There are other places that could use a little kindness, a little guidance, but I'll always remember you boys and the changes you've made." The boys feel a pang of sadness, but also a deep gratitude. They stand together, giving him a respectful bow just as he had taught them. "Thank you, sir," they say in unison, their voices filled with sincerity. "We won't forget what you've taught us." Kane nods, a quiet pride in his expression. "And I won't forget you. Keep doing good, and keep finding strength in kindness." With that, they part ways, knowing that the lessons they've shared will carry on long after Kane has gone. As Kane walks away from the park, the boys watch him go, feeling a bittersweet mixture of loss and hope. They know that he has left a mark on their lives that time will never erase. A reminder that real strength lies not in power but in compassion, not in dominance but in understanding. Weeks later, as they continue their work at the community center, they find themselves passing on Kane's teachings to the kids they mentor. They tell them stories about a wise old man who taught them that strength comes from within, that kindness is a choice, and that every person has the potential to change. And every time they share these lessons, they see the same look of realization that they once had, the same shift from fear to respect, from anger to empathy. It's a small change, but they know that it's the start of something bigger, something that will continue to grow long after they've moved on. One evening, as the last of the kids leave the center, the leader of the group stands outside, looking up at the stars. He thinks back to the day they met Kane, the day their lives took a turn they never could have predicted. A smile spreads across his face as he realizes just how far they've come. Turning back to the community center, he knows that the real journey has only just begun. But for the first time, he feels ready to face the challenges ahead, to be a leader, and to live up to the lessons Kane entrusted them with. As he walks inside, he whispers a quiet promise to himself and to the memory of the man who changed his life. "We'll keep the lessons alive, sir. We'll make you proud."